Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. So, since we have not finished the round for today, round 7, for the Sinkfield Cup, I went back to the St. Louis Rapid and Blitz, grabbed another game. So I do have Wesley So versus Leinier Domínguez Pérez. So, as always, my people in the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you. Masaya ako makinig muli. Maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking mga video. Masaya tayo. Mag lunch na tayo if it's lunch for you at some point when you see this. Magandang po, magandang araw. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. We are going to see who is Malakas in this game. Anybody who is coming from Cuba or who does speak Spanish, I would say buenos dias, mis amigos. Muchas gracias por ver mi video. Bienvenidos a mi channel. Yes. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias for coming by and taking a look at my stuff real quick. If you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have. Vamos. All right. So we got C4, C5, G3, G6, Bishop to G2, Bishop to G7, Knight to C3, Knight to C6, D3, D6. So we have the English opening symmetrical variation, and I bet you cannot guess why it is the symmetrical variation. Anyways, this is like super duper 100% symmetrical. It's crazy. So this is like true to its name. Queen comes to D2. We got E6. So now the symmetry has been broken. We got B3, Knight G to E7, Bishop to B2, castles, and we have H4. Now H4 is pretty sound in this position. It's not like ultimately the best move. It's still pretty good. But you guys have to be very careful. Like, you know, you don't want to just be throwing like wing pawns all over the place. So, you know, it depends on each position. So make sure when you're calculating your position that H4 is not going to like get you killed. So, yes, we have H6. We're trying to slow down, you know, because white wants to hook onto this pawn and create some weaknesses and stuff like that. So that's the whole point. So H6 is just aiming to slow that down. You know, plus possibly play like, you know, G5 in response to H5, you know, to you know, reduce the threat. Knight comes to F3, and we do have D5. And D5 is the novelty of the game. You probably can owe D5 being the novelty to the fact that we see H4 and then H6. Those aren't like always the normal moves that you see like right out of the opening. So, I mean, you know, we got into a novelty pretty quickly. Pawn takes D5, pawn takes D5. We got Knight to A4. And Knight to A4 is doing two things. First, it's attacking the undefended pawn. And also, it's offering a trade of bishops. Leinier Domínguez Pérez, he does trade bishops. So we see bishop takes B2, knight takes B2. And the major thing that you should notice about the position right now is for anybody who plays like the Dragons or the Moderns or Pirts or anything like that, this bishop is highly, highly valuable. So I'm really confused as to why Leinier Domínguez Pérez would trade this bishop off when it's like one of the main defenders of his king. So that's the first thing that kind of struck me as weird. But, I mean, maybe there's a deep plan involved in it. We'll see. King comes to H7. We see rook over to C1. Just constantly harassing this pawn. Saying, bro, I want your pawn. So B6 comes. We got D4. Pawn takes D4. We got H5. And like I said before, you know, if H5 came, we were trying to look at, you know, trying to throw G5, seeing like, hey, man, I'm shutting all that down, right? Cool. We have actually reached a point in the game that if you want to pause the video, white has a killer move in the position. If you want to pause the video and see if you can guess that, go ahead and do so. Okay, this actually, unfortunately, G5 loses an entire piece. So I'm not sure if you guys see it, but black is about to just drop a whole piece right now. So if you guessed rook takes C6, bam, just like blowing the position up. The unfortunate thing about this situation is you have rook takes C6, knight takes C6, and then queen coming to C2, and you are now forking the king and then the knight, and you are losing an entire piece. And what we actually saw in the game is king over to G7, which just gives white the entire true piece. Now, there was never a way to defend the knight on C6, but There was actually a really, really nice move that the computer suggested that was like mind-blowing when I saw it, and I will show you guys. You know, because I think you guys are pretty cool, so I'll show you guys. Like I'll bring you guys in on the secret. D3. Like, okay, D3? Like, you're thinking, man, hold on a second, bro. The queen, the knight, and the pawn are all hitting D3. How can you push D3? I literally, when I saw this, the computer said D3. I did it, and I'm just like, what? Dude, how do you push D3, and how does that work at all? Like, it block. I mean, you still drop the knight. It blocks the queen real quick, but, like, it's ugly, I felt like, man. Once I show you all the little variations, you're going to be like, man, that's crazy. Computers are crazy, bro. Just in a direct variation, you see queen taking C6. And then the computer is saying bishop to A6. It actually puts white at about not quite +2. So you're down a piece. You do have, let me see, 3, 6, 7. You do have a pawn to show for it. And you actually have a lot of threats because this king is stuck in the center of the board. So the best possible move in the position by the computer is bishop to H3. Like, don't touch the pawn. You know, don't knight the pawn, don't pawn the pawn, don't nothing. Like, don't castle or anything. Just literally just bishop to H3. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to prevent rook coming to C8. And let me just show you. So we'll run through the rest of this. That's it right there. Okay. When we run through these other variations, you'll be like, okay, I get it. Like, this makes a whole lot of sense why you want to go bishop to H3. This is like, the computer is just super deep, bro. So after D3, if you were to, let's say, take with the pawn, this would be actually very losing for white because you would see rook over to E8 with check. King would come up to D2 most likely. Then you'd have rook over to C8. Queen coming to C4, like the only move. Queen coming to C7. And you literally have the king like suffocated in this box that you really can't do anything about. And you are just completely losing as white. You're up a piece, but you're just completely losing as white. That's insane. Like, so if you, I mean, it would have been crazy if Domínguez would have actually saw this. So if you were to actually, after bishop to A6, if you were to go knight takes D3, thinking, okay, this might be a little bit safer, you'd see bishop taking D3, pawn taking D3, rook over to C8. And like I said, that's why the computer wanted you to play bishop to H3. Queen would come up to B7, so it kind of seems like you're getting out of this one. Rook over to E8 with check, king comes to D2 as well. Rook to C7, queen to A6, and then queen to E7, and you're thinking probably, man, you know what? I'm going to play rook to E1. Everything is defended. Rook coming to E1, and then bam, queen coming to B4. Like, where do you go, bro? This is horrible. Like, the king has to probably move back, and you're looking at this, and it's like, what are we doing? Man, the computer is insane, dude. Like, the computer, I don't even know, man. It's so insane, some of the variations that it gives you, dude. Like, I mean, it would be really crazy if Leinier Domínguez actually played this way in the game. It's crazy. But no. We saw king to G7. Very human move. So this allows queen taking C6. And it honestly just kind of starts going downhill from here. Bishop comes to G4. And queen comes to A4. So, I mean, basically white is able to pretty much do everything with tempo in these positions that we're coming up in. Queen comes to F6. We see queen taking D4. So now we're offering a trade of queens, which is what black does not want to do. Rook A comes to C8. King comes up to D2, you know, protecting C2. Bishop takes F3, and then we throw in the intermezzo. Queen takes F6 with check. King takes F6. Bishop takes F3. And you guys can see, like, everything is just everything. Like, you have 3 pieces. Yeah, you got to play, you know, 2 minor pieces against the rook, but you can do it. D4, we got bishop to E4, king to E5, bishop down to D3. F5, knight comes to C4, so we're improving our pieces. King comes up to E6, we got A4. Rook F to D8, rook to F1. Rook comes to C7, we see F3. Rook to F8, rook to A1. We're trying to see if we can rip open the A file a little bit, get our rook activated. Rook comes to C5, we see knight down to A3. Rook comes up to C7, we see A5. Rook comes to B8. Knight comes to B5, attacking this knight and, tickling his pawn real quick. We see rook over to D7. Pawn takes B6. Rook takes B6. Knight takes A7. So now as white, we managed to grab a pawn. So we're up a piece and a pawn. Rook D comes to B7. We see rook to A5. F4. Pawn takes F4. Pawn takes F4. We see knight down to B5. Double protected by the rook and the bishop. King comes down to E5. We see knight to A3 with the discover check on the king. And so you're going to go king to E6. You either have to go king to E6 or you have to go king to F6. You definitely cannot go king to D6 because you're going to see knight to C4. And that's Hindi. No, you don't want to do that, bro. Don't do that, man. Hindi. No, don't do it, man. So backing up, king comes to E6. We see knight down to C2. And this is being sneaky because you're thinking like, hey, man, I'm going to get a pawn. No, you're not. No. That's an expensive pawn, bro. Knight comes down to C2. We see rook over to D6. We got B4. Rook comes to G7, trying to penetrate. And so basically you see white plugging all the holes up. There's no action on this one. There's no action on this one. Nothing going on this one. And there's nothing going on this one. It's just like white has everything solved up. Rook comes over to B7. We see king to D3. King to E7. Rook over to E5 with check. King comes to F6. Rook to F5 with check. King coming to G7. And then rook takes F4. And Leinier Domínguez Pérez said, hey, man, I had enough. And this is the position that he resigns the game. Basically, you're going to be able to take this pawn like just for free. And you're not going to compromise your knight's position. So at some point, you're going to be taking this pawn. You know, you're just going to be able to either trade down pieces. You know, you're going to be able to take back with the king type situation. And you're going to be saving your pawn. So you're just going to have 4 pawns against 1 pawn. And you're going to have an extra piece. And that's all she wrote, man. So, yes. So, Wesley so was Malacas. I think... I don't know if I'm gonna say this correctly. Wesley so si Malacas or Lacas. I don't know. I don't know fully how the phrase goes, but you guys get what I mean. Malacas, Wesley so. It's killer. So that was a nice one. But yes, I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. I'll do these good mornings real quick for my people in the Philippines. So my ayaw bong talk. Maya na agahan, naibeg na bigat, masantos siya kabasan, marhe na aga, buenos dias, maayong aga, mapia na kapi ang kapo no Dios, maya na, I think it's mapia, let me freaking look, bro. It's been a minute since I did this right. I messed up yesterday, I left one out. Mayapa abak, maya na aga, mapia agay, mapia kapapita, my big abukla, marjana buntag, marya may not. Malpena aga kasanyagan CLB. Salam, assalamu alaikum. See to you guys. Appreciate you guys very much. Muchas gracias, mis amigos. Hasta luego. Me quiero tayo mamaya. And I'll see you guys next time.